We're going to be taking some questions from the audience. So if you please come over to the mic and you can address our panel. And in the meantime, I'll ask a couple of them, starting with Shaka. Shaka, what do you think are the lessons and best practices learned in regards of what you saw that we could use here in the United States to push in policies that you saw that you've seen implemented in Cuba in regards to reducing youth violence?
Can I tell a story before I answer your question? I'll try to be quick with it.
You have 15 minutes.
One of the times when I was down there, we were doing some construction work, building it was a rehabilitation facility, and it was a construction crew of 10, it was mostly about 10 guys. And they work about 10 to 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. They don't have a lot of construction materials, you know. They would build a ladder out of the leftover board so they could climb up and put something, you know what I mean? Like, they were really making it happen with what they had. So we were out there helping, just doing some work, a couple days. Finally, it was like the 4th day, and there was a guy, a young guy, and he had a funny shaped scar on his back. He was shirt off, it was hot out. He had like a circular scar on his back. And I was like, yo, man, what happened to you? Why, you know, what's on your back? And he said, oh, you know, I got into a fight. And I got into a fight with this guy, and he stabbed me with a bottle, you know, but I messed him up too. And then I was like, oh, you know, that's not really asking about all that. I'm just curious, you know, what happened. So what happened to you after you got into that fight? That seems like a, you know, pretty violent situation. What happened out here? You know, did you get arrested? He was like, oh, that's why I'm here at this construction site. I was like, what do you mean? He said, I'm serving my time. I said, you're serving your time? I've been working with this guy for 4 days. I ain't seen one police. I ain't seen no probation. Nobody treated him like he was a stepson or that he was, you know, lesser than them. He gets to go home after work, and then he has to report to jail on the weekends because he goes for classes and other things that they're doing to institute, trying to help him to have some better options for when he gets done with that situation. So he told me that after 6 months of doing this, he could join the union. At 6 months after that, when he's done with his time, he can decide if he wants to stay working as a construction worker or if he wants to go switch professions and go to another field. And in terms of the lessons I've learned, I work with kids all the time who've been through fights and hurt people, shot people. Never are they treated this way. I've been in Chicago to one of the so-called best practices and seen their juvenile probation department with kids who, if they sit in one of these chairs, y'all, their feet wouldn't touch the floor. They got a PO who comes to their school with a badge, and the PO wants to have a gun in our country, but that's debated, right? People are questioning this. But basically, this kid is so small, his feet can't touch the floor, but what we've said is, we got a mechanism for you. We got armed officers, law enforcement officers, we got people who will watch you. And anytime you make a mistake, they will come for you, and we got a cage for you waiting. And what I saw down there is we're gonna invest in you. We're gonna find out what you wanna do. Dude said he actually liked doing construction because he never did work with his hands before, and at the end of the day, he could see what he had done, and it made him feel good about himself. Right? How often are these practices utilized here? We spend, how much does it cost to go to UCLA? I bet it don't cost as much as it goes to upstate, to one of these prisons in California, because in our country, we'll spend more, we will invest more, we'll pay people more to hold you down with their foot on your neck than to help you get yourself in line with what Brother Juan is talking about right here next to me. And so what I saw down there is what Alex said. They pay people to go to school. They pay people to be good parents, to take parenting classes. I mean, these are jobs, you know, and being responsible for people is upheld as something that is significant and that's honorable. And so you don't treat your fellow coworker who's there because they're serving time as an animal. You don't treat them as some type of dangerous monster that at any moment needs to be tossed in a cage when we are not comfortable with them. And so those are the practices to me that we got a long ways to go before they live out here on a day-to-day basis. But those are the lessons that I think, you know, you can't fake that. You cannot, you know, you can't recreate that. And there was no sheriffs with shotguns standing around while we working. When we take a break, everybody gets water. He didn't go last. You know what I mean? It was just all the little things we do. Have you ever been convicted of a felony? Sorry, you can't get this. Oh, you want to get this job working for the city or the state? Well, tell me about your background. What happened to you on the worst day of your life and you got caught for it? Because me asking the question, yeah, I got into some trouble too, but I didn't get caught. So in this country, we don't talk about that, right? It's only on you. Once we got you, the bullseye's on you. So some of the practices are really instituting programs and then pushing for people to really have a way to re-engage and get back in the mainstream of society.
Thank you.
First, I just want to thank the entire panel for an extraordinary session. I listen to a lot of talk force in my profession, and believe me, this is the best I've heard in months, and I hear a lot. A comment first, which is that I think we're at a hopeful moment right now with a new administration that is changing that Securitate paradigm of anti-terrorism, anti-crime, trying to invest in community again, which is one of the main themes of this panel. So I think that it's imperative that we encourage not only new paradigms in you know, the problem of youth violence, but also in the whole sort of way in which we're going to make money again, not at the expense of the environment and not at the expense of undocumented workers, but in a more responsible way. And I'm hoping that we can build some bridges at this moment. I think there's an opportunity that we shouldn't miss. The question I have is to Juan Pacheco. I have to say that you really are good. You are very good in your conveying of ideas and of passion. From my perspective, you know, I've been in the ivory tower for pretty much all of my life. I've been, you know, I work in conflict regions in Africa, so I've been in jail, actually. So I'm not trying to, you know, we're all just individuals in that sense. We don't choose our parents. But, you know, I know how hard, as someone who grew up in an academic environment, it is to do well in a university. And that's with all of the familiarity of academic writing, language, and the subtle things of cultural distinction that go along with that. And occasionally, at Columbia University, where I've taught, at the University of Chicago, where I've taught, and here, we do get remarkable students who come in from ghettos or from underprivileged backgrounds and from El Salvador and from war conflict situations. Sometimes I've had students who've been in gangs, and I'd say about 60% of the time, pardon my language, they fuck up in the university. They're so good, they're so close. And then, God damn it, they don't come to class, and they don't turn in that paper, and they lose it, and they're out. You haven't gone out. Yeah, you stayed the course, and I'm saying I can understand how hard it is, but the distance involved. We talked about mobility. The distance involved in coming into the academy and succeeding. But what do I do when I see a student who's right on the margin? And if I give him or her too much rope, he or she will hang herself. And if I'm too tough, I become part of the problem. How do we do that? Give me advice.
Good comment. You know, I believe, you know, Bill Gates is a gangster. You know, he does hustling, he does mobilizing, he does networking, right? Yeah, recruiting, another word in the street. So what helped me is people that were able to do what I have just done with you. Take the marketable products of the street and translate it to the marketable products of an academic world, a working world, the social world, right? So, for example, I mean, I still think like a gang member. But again, so does Bill Gates. So the purpose is and the whys and the reasons have changed. If I hadn't found people like Nane and elders who had gone through the pain and struggles of this transformational thing, called leaving violence, I wouldn't have done it. It's the language, it's the understanding the culture, understanding, how to disengage young people from that world, and maybe just not disengage, but use it for different purposes, right? Because again, in order to work with a young person who's involved in gang, you need to know a little bit about culture. And not just one culture, you need to know at least 4 cultures, right? So for example, working with a blood in a crib is different than working with somebody from MS. So you need to know a little bit about ethnic culture, right? You also need to know a little bit about youth culture. If you don't know anything about youth culture and their language and their way of looking at art and language and this and that, then there's a lot of psychologists that come out of UCLA or whatever, or George Mason University in my world, who just want to love working with kids, right? But they never looked at MTV or BET or gotten immersed in the world and the culture of youth, right? Now, there's another subculture that you need to understand. That's the culture of gangs, right? A whole bunch of people that want to work with gang members, but who are great psychologists, but when you put them in the field with real homies, they are utilizing all the psychology that they were taught in college, and they make really grave, dangerous mistakes, right? But then in order to really help that young person transition to a different type of world, you need to understand the culture of violence. You need to understand the systematic desensitizing of young people within the hood world, which is the same that the army uses with a sniper. You need to understand that culture of violence, the cycle of violence in terms of kind of like what's it called, domestic violence, right? The whole, increase of tension and then actual implementation of violence and then honeymoon stage, right? Well, same thing happens in the gang world, right? They give you unrealistic demands and commands. If you don't, submit to those commands and things, they punish you. And after they punish you, they tell you, oh, homie, it was for your own good, blah, blah, blah. You need to understand all that stuff, right? Before utilizing the right rhetoric and right encouragement and right just relationship that'll make sure that young person stays in college, right? One of the most powerful things that an elder taught me when I was starting college is that he told me, you know what? Creator didn't make you to be mediocre, right? And see, I was willing to not be mediocre out in the street and do things, right? But he taught me that I could do that in the academic world. So in the academic world, I've actually graduated with top honors with the National Dean's List and the Golden Key International Society, blah, blah, blah. Because a caring adult, right, was able to care enough to understand that subculture and help me along with it, right? There is a way to do it. These young people are so resourceful, imaginative. They can do great things. Well, not great things. Great things, but negative things with little, if I'm making myself clear in the street, right? There's a lot of ingenuity. So how do you turn that ingenuity and creative energy and God-given potential into something different, right? And again, Barrios Unidos, again, we're not against gangs and we're not against gang members. That's not the point, because gang members, they're part of us as much as we're part of them. We are against the violence and negativity that are eating away our communities, right? And we do whatever we can to give these young people alternatives and options and hopefully get people to college. Because imagine a young person who has operated in the street with nothing, what he could do in the real world to make change, to generate peace, right? There's great people in the world who are taught in the army and in that world to go and do social disruption, right? I bet you those are the best people to go out there and generate peace if you turn the thing around. The schema, the way of thinking, the worldview. So don't give up, man, because those 60% that you were talking about, they're worth it, man. If you could help one stay in school, maybe he could be the galvanizing force to tell other people about this dream, about the shifting of the mind that could lead to positive effects to all of humanity, right? Because it is within that pain and within the grief of the streets that I find my redemption. If I hadn't gone through that, this thing that we're doing here wouldn't be as sweet. And so we need those folks. There's too much potential and dreams locked up in jails all over this country. Let's make sure that we recapture those dreams. And don't give up, brother. There's a lot of them are going to be, they're going to be dream makers. And so do your part, and I hope you guys do your part to uplift these young people. And don't give up.
Thank you, Juan. Do we have other questions? I want just real quick, Professor Petit, the issue of war and the conflicts of war, and we've seen, you know, the different changes in regards of the impact of war. We've seen the Revolutionary War in Cuba and how that government took over and how their social services are being directed differently. We saw the war in El Salvador, the 12-year civil war that has, you know, devastated the impact where we've had 15 people getting killed a day in a country as small as almost Los Angeles. And, you know, in Palestine, which has lasted a lot longer, how are this youth in Palestine being impacted by the trauma that war, and is there something being done about it?
Yeah, it's hard to capture the violence that people have lived with, if we're, especially if we're talking, you know, the Gaza and West Bank under occupation. It's been 40 years of continuous violence. Violence is just a part of everyday life. And one of the saddest things is that there are almost no mechanisms to help youth. The need for mental health services is phenomenal. I mean, when you think of Gaza with what happened in December and January, where you have literally hundreds of thousands of children, you know, being under prolonged military attack, there's a high level of post-traumatic stress disorder, extremely high. And we also saw with Gaza just the lack of basic medical care. I mean, the situation, I don't think I can describe how dire it really is in terms of the conditions of youth, with very little help from anywhere. And there's a sense that they're receiving very little help. They feel abandoned by the global community, by their own leadership, in fact. So I'm going to leave it at that.
Thank you. There's a lot of things that were said today that have impacted all countries that we're talking about. And I could go on and on talking about, you know, the checkpoints, the segregation, the extreme poverty, unemployment, war, child soldiers, migration, and on and on and on, that have caused many of our youth who lost their ways or are forced to arm themselves or in the path of destruction. But I think that we need to focus on some of those positive things that could come out of this and what connects us all. And we talk about, you know, what we seek and you know, and what the Professor Petit said, you know, the sense of space, and just resonates that, you know, we need that space. We need to create that space for us to be ourselves, to show our culture and learn of each other, and be able to receive that knowledge, you know, that we desperately need about our own selves, our own past. And how can we implement this in social movements such as protesting peacefully to get our things done? I recently saw the movie Sicko again, and I was reminded that, you know, in the scene, this government figure in Britain was saying, you know what, the problem is that in the United States, people are afraid of the government. We are not afraid of the government. In those places they were saying. And I think that we need to empower our youth. We need to get them to mobilize on the issues that are impacting them, and we're losing that battle with our youth. And we need to organize more. We need to get them out there and not being afraid of this system that has been causing this demonizing of our youth. Our people are afraid of our children now because they've been demonized. They've been portrayed as those evildoers. And now, especially in the issue of the Central American issue, they've been now being labeled as terrorists and being thought after with foreign policies in a way that you have government now helping, the U.S. government now helping militarized Central America to stop those social movements to coming into place, such as they're going to have elections in El Salvador on the 15th, where the left, the FMLN party, that was the revolutionary party, is ahead in a large percentage, will most likely will become the first time that they win the elections. So we are hopeful in some ways in the midst of this hopelessness that we hear. And not just wanted to end with saying, you know, that our worst enemies, and now, you know, and I got to quote this from somebody else, and I don't know who said it, but our biggest enemy is ignorance, you know, and we need to go back and see what techniques are being used to educate our people, and we are seeing this through hip hop. I was going through the YouTube and I saw a video of a Palestine rapper, you know, and I was like, I can't understand the word, but I like the beat, you know. And I think that that is the tools that we need to use today to actually educate our youth in a national and global scale to empower them to take action and create the new generation that you were said of the drum. We are, and we all are, of indigenous descent, and we do carry that drumbeat. And I want to thank you all for being here today.